Hey, welcome back to episode 184 of Nights of the Storm. Today is the 11th of July. That is 7/11/2026. Go ahead and pull on into the 7-Eleven and grab yourself a Slurpee. Sit back and relax because we're going to be talking today with Eric Peters from EP Autos about the evolution of transportation, what that means for us. Transportation is one of those things that affect nearly the entire population. So we're going to be talking about where we came from, where we are now, and where we are potentially heading. And hopefully we can come up with some solutions for some of those things that some of us don't particularly like. Today, joining me, of course, is the lovely Lady of Liberty, Miss Karen Carpenter. How you doing? You there, Karen?
I'm doing great. I hope everybody had a good 4th of July. We had a great time at my house. And I'm having a lot of buffering. Are we having issues?
No, we're good. We got you, Karen. It'll work itself out. And also joining us today
I may leave and come back.
Okay.
I may leave and come back.
And joining us today as well for a short bit is Miss Think Change Repeat herself, the lovely Ashley. And Ashley's in the middle of moving, so you may not be with us the whole time. We got cats going crazy over there trying to figure out what the hell is going on. So how you doing, Ashley?
Doing okay. I was originally thinking that I may not be able to make it, but I figured if I could, I was going to try to hop on here. I'll be here as long as I can. And yeah, it's chaos out there everywhere except for this little space. So bear with me.
Right on. Well, I pray that all goes well with your move. I know it's very stressful. We did that a lot in the military, and I was used to it, but the family, it's just, and then the animals. Oh my gosh, the animals, they go haywire. And then, of course, we got Mr. Eric Peters from epautos.com. Always love having you on, brother. It is great to hear your perspectives. And I got a couple leading questions for you. But first, let's see how you're doing. What's going on?
Pretty well. I actually may have finally hit pay dirt. My many months long search for a new old stock center console for my old Firebird.
Yes.
I may have found it. Just before we went on air, I found a listing on Facebook Marketplace. So I'm trying to contact the guy and we'll see. That is proved to be, in 30 years of fiddling around with these cars, the hardest single part to find yet, which I never would have expected because they made a lot of those cars. Mm-hmm. But as it turned out, that particular part is unobtainium. The aftermarket doesn't make it. And so, after all this time has passed, the only ones that are left are the really nice ones that are in somebody's car. You can't find a decent one. You can find a chewed up one in a junkyard someplace and maybe send it off to Just Dashes, which does resto work on that kind of stuff. But that'll cost you a fortune. So I've just been assiduously scanning eBay and Facebook literally every day, kind of like a great white shark, waiting until I can find my target.
Yeah, that's got to be tough. And Karen is back with us. Let's pop her in here. I actually was going to email you. I used to be into the audio industry, the car audio stuff and alarm stuff, that kind of goes hand in hand. And people do this where they take fabric, they make a frame, they take fabric and they use resin and they can build one for you. But I know that's not what you're going for, was a remake. You're going for like the original. Yeah.
The thing is, I've got a very original car with the original interior that's, almost Concours quality. So if I put in one of the aftermarket reproduction consoles, it's going to be obviously not correct for the car. It'll just ruin everything. So that's the thing. I have to find something that's original and has a little bit of a patina of age, to match the original stuff.
All right, well, let's jump into it. I normally do a verse of the week. I don't have a verse of the week today, but what I will ask is I'll just ask people for prayer. My wife found out this morning that her granny was overdosed by the home she's in. They overdosed her and she went to the hospital. So she's out there now. She's released from the hospital. She's okay. Let's pray for them that she doesn't have any stuff. I know other people got stuff going on. Anybody have a prayer request, anything like that? Pray for a new console for Eric. Karen, Ashley.
Oh, I'm good. I'm just happy to be here.
Pray for the cats that they calm down.
If we could pray for my new edition on the way, please, that it will arrive safe and sound when it's supposed to. Thank you.
Right on. Well, let's go ahead and jump into it. So, Eric, I wanted to start with this. If people don't know who you are, you do car reviews. Again, you've been doing it for decades now. I was kind of curious as to how you got started. It seems like a dream job. You get sent cars, you get to drive them around and give your opinions. Yeah. And then you also do your writing on your website, a lot of political stuff, libertarian kind of stuff, centered around transportation, which is really, transportation is what built this nation and made us the premier nation in the world, was the ability to have independent transportation, to ship goods across vast distances and improve the quality of life of everybody. And that bled out through the rest of the West. And so they really built themselves off the back of our work, primarily Henry Ford and the Model T and the assembly line. So I kind of wanted to start there. Like how did you get into it? I mean, this is something I would do. I could totally.
Well, I sort of drifted into it, and it's not as easy as it sounds, in the sense that not every car I get to drive is a Ferrari. Week after week, I typically get a transportation appliance, some kind of crossover that is different from the previous crossover, in that, hey, this one's got an 11.25-inch touchscreen, and last week I had one that had a 10-inch touchscreen. So it is somewhat difficult to provide an informational and interesting car review. As far as how I got into it, I kind of just sort of drifted into it. I mean, I've been piddling with cars since I was 13. I got into journalism when I was in high school and then college. And then after I got out, I just did general assignment news reporting initially. And that led to me eventually getting hired on by the Washington Times and the editorial page staff as an editorial writer. And it turned out, that there were opportunities to write about things pertaining to cars, because, of course, a lot of regulations pertain to cars. A lot of regulations pertain to roads and driving and all of that. And at the time, the Times had a pretty big automotive section. So I started writing for the automotive section, as well as doing unbylined editorials for the editorial page staff. And one thing led to another, and I just started doing more and more of the car stuff. And I guess it clicked, and I thought, wow, I really actually enjoy, professionally writing about the car stuff more so than the political stuff, even though I still do write about the political stuff. But that's how it happened. I became a car columnist for the Washington Times, and I gradually got published in a number of other places. And after a while, I got to the point where I could go on my own and be independent and freelance. And I did that in the late 90s, I guess. And I've been doing it ever since.
That's phenomenal. I remember I used to hang out with my buddy. We worked at a restaurant, Bob Evans, of 270 and 70, if you know where that's at in St. Louis. And when we would get out after closing the restaurant, we go down to a 7-Eleven, which ironically it's 7-Eleven today. And there was a dude who worked midnight shift there, 24-hour gas station / convenience store. And we would go through the Auto Trader magazine, just talk cars all night. Mm-hmm. So a job like you have, he would have loved it, my friend Brian. And I would have loved it. But that's good stuff, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do the ladies got? You got any questions for Eric about his origins and stuff like that?
I do have a question. So I've been thinking about this because I know that Eric is working solo, has his website.
I'm struggling. I've got a lot of lag.
Maybe try to restart, Karen. When you exited before, did you restart your computer?
No, I'll do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll check and make sure we're not on high def as well, because that can cause lag issues sometimes. I think we're on 720p But anyway, go ahead, Ashley.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, as Eric is doing his own thing, making his own way, it's very libertarian, which I love. But have you felt, what is the word, punished because of your libertarian beliefs and being very outspoken against so much of the nonsense? And I know, we have so much cooperation, it seems, between the automakers and big government, and you're actively you're putting it out there like, I'm driving this car and I'm going to tell you what I think, but I'm not kissing anyone's rear about this. So if you have received punishment basically, or pushback, or what does that look like for you? How do you handle that?
Well, sure, because I didn't pick a side, team red, team blue. It's kind of like being the redheaded stepchild when you're in this country where everything's binary. It seems, you have to sort of ideologically fall into one of the two camps. I don't. I've got this oddball libertarian / anarchist perspective about things. But as far as the reviews go, I've always been fair, or tried to be fair. And I try not to incorporate my own personal biases into it. I'm not a huge fan of certain types of vehicles, but who cares whether I'm a particular fan of a certain type of vehicle? I try to look at it from the point of view of somebody who might be interested in a vehicle of that kind, like what would be relevant to them.
Yeah. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to say you did do a review about this Mercedes wagon, and you were like, look, this is, for what it is, like, this is a pretty good wagon. And you explained all the benefits. And I was like, you know what? That sounds pretty good, even though it's one of the newer models and not that rule that we talked about, like 2014 or newer or whatever. But I did think that you were fair.
Yeah. And that's so far stood me in good stead. I did have some issues, ironically, that you bring up with Mercedes over my coverage of their electric vehicles. And it wasn't that I slammed Mercedes per se. I just pointed out, this was, I guess, about 3 years ago. I've been getting cars from Mercedes for more than 30 years, back to the days when I worked at the Washington Times. Anyway, they sent me one of their EVs and then another one of their EVs. And I had problems with charging it and problems with worrying about the range. It turned out that one of them that they'd sent me was during a particularly cold snap here in Southwest Virginia in December. And Dawn and I were going to go visit my mom, who was at the time in this assisted care facility. And it was so cold out that the range plummeted. And then we figured, well, maybe we should try to get the thing charged before we drive up to Lynchburg, which it's not that far, but it's 50, 60 miles down the road. And I didn't want to have us stuck by the side of the road when it's -8 degrees outside. So I'm trying to charge the thing, and the first place I went to, it wouldn't work at all. The second place was torturous. That they had the procedure that you had to go through to get the little kiosk thing to accept your credit card. They wanted you to sign up for an app and download stuff on your phone. And so I wrote about these travails, and particularly I pointed out, if I'm a guy who's going to potentially spend $120,000, this was a top of the line electric S-Class. I don't want to be hassled like this. Part of the whole purpose of being rich is to not have to stand in line and be hassled. That's why people who fly first class don't stand waiting for the TSA gate check. They get to go through first. They get on the plane first. They get off the plane first. So I wrote about that. And all of a sudden I was not in good stead with Mercedes. And they gave me this rap about how I was now outside of the orbit of their delivery area. Notwithstanding that they've been bringing me cars. I've lived here 22 years. They've been bringing me cars for 22 years. All of a sudden it was a problem. So I'm on the outs with Mercedes right now. But that's pretty much the only example of payback that I've had to deal with.
Okay. Honestly, that is really amazing to me. But I do know a gal who writes for Motor Biscuit, and there have been a couple of companies that she's not even particularly political at all, but a couple of their bad lists that she got on, and just for being like slightly critical. And eventually, after, let's say, many months or maybe even a couple of years, then they kind of give her another opportunity. And I wasn't sure if you anticipate that with Mercedes or.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure eventually personnel will change. It might have been that there was an individual over there that had an issue with me. And once that individual doesn't work there any longer, new people come in, the situation changes. So, it is what it is. I guess I understand it from their point of view. I think it's counterproductive because I'm going to write about it. I did write about it. When all of a sudden I got yanked from the press pool for Mercedes vehicles, I explained to people why. And, honestly, what happened? So fine. If I'm Mercedes, I wouldn't want that kind of publicity. It doesn't look good.
I'm glad y'all brought that up. I wasn't planning on talking about that, but one of the articles that you had written recently was about the experience with EVs in general. It doesn't matter, which one. But one of the things that really struck me was, number one, do you have the right adapter? Because not all EVs are the same. You can't get the fast charge at home because most people are not wired for that. And then there's an additional cost if you do get that service. But you have to use an app to find a charging location, if it's working, if there's not somebody already there charging. And then you get there. And then what really concerned me about it, and this is kind of the direction I wanted to go today, was the surveillance side of things. You have to wind up downloading an app because you can't just throw some dollar bills in the machine. You have to download an app, attach a credit card. And now we all know what happens when you download an app is now you're being tracked by the apparatus there. And, your information is being sold as well. And I have proof of that. I have absolute proof that it doesn't matter if they tell you that they don't share your information. They do. And I know this because the internet company we signed on with when we got here, they misspelled my wife's name, and we started getting junk mail with that same misspelling, even though they said they don't share our information. But that's kind of a big thing, is the additional annoyance of having to play into this technological system just to fuel your vehicle.
Yeah.
That's a horrible thing.
To begin with, it's astounding to me when I think about the fact that they didn't even consider that perhaps there ought to be standardization. Imagine if there were different types of gas pump nozzles, and you weren't really quite sure when you pulled up to a gas station whether their pump was going to fit your fuel inlet. You can go to any gas station and all the pumps will fit any car's gas tank nozzle. Just put it in and go, right? It's not that way.
With the exception of diesel. They intentionally make diesel different so you can't accidentally put that.
That's a good thing, right? You don't want to pump diesel into the tank of a gas car. That's potentially catastrophic. This is different. So, you've got multiple different charging interfaces. So you have to, first of all, establish whether that particular fast charging place, is it a Tesla place? Is it an EVgo? Is it a Charge America? And is my car going to be able to charge there? So there's that to consider. And then there's the whole rigmarole that you have to go through. It's not like, when you go to a gas station, just lift the handle, throw the handle, pump the gas, and you can pay cash. You can go inside and hand the guy a 20. This is entirely electronic. There's no human being at these fast charging places. It's just a totem pole. Yeah, and you have to go there and you have to either insert your credit card, debit card, download an app, a QR code. And it's, sometimes in my experience, it's very cumbersome and clunky. It's not like your usual card readers that are really quick, in and out, you're authorized and good to go. It's this whole convoluted process of waiting to see if it's going to accept it and then pairing it. And then the final thing, gosh, there's so many things. Gas station handles are really easy to manipulate. Anybody pretty much can pick it up and put the thing in the nozzle, turn it on. These heavy gauge, they're very heavy gauge. They make them to look like a gas pump, I guess, because I guess they want for people to think it's a familiar thing. But they're very heavy gauge cabling, which they have to be because these DC fast chargers involve extremely high voltages. So you've got this heavy apparatus that you have to work around and get it to your charge point. And I'm a pretty big, strong guy, and having to do that and manipulate it and push that thing and get it to lock. It has to lock. It's a safety feature. And then to get it to work. And then when you're done, a half hour, 45 minutes later, after you're doing whatever you're doing, then to get it to disconnect, sometimes it doesn't want to. And you'll find yourself tugging at this thing, pushing at the button. It's just a surreal hassle to do something that is so simple, so quick, so easy. And you have all these apologists making excuses for this. You could try to imagine a scenario where you went to a fast food place and instead of being in and out of there with your burger in your lap after 5 minutes, you have to spend 45 minutes going through a process, and then you don't just get your burger, you get some complicated box that's got all kinds of wrapping on it that you have to open to get to your hand. I mean, nobody would put up with that. But people are told somehow they're supposed to put up with this with regard to the electric vehicles. It's fascinating, as Mr. Spock used to say.
And I was just wondering, Eric, do you think that this is, and excuse my language, earmuffs people, but do you think that this is part of the enshittification? Like we talked about brutalist architecture and we talk about making everything worse. And then, do you think it's just part of that just to make like life a little more frustrating, a little less pleasurable, a little less simple?
Well, it certainly is. Whether it's deliberate is another matter. I do think that a lot of industries, the car industry, looked at the smartphone industry with envy and awe. And they looked at, wow, look, they're selling these little screen things. You type these apps, and they tried to make vehicles like that. That's why you have touchscreens now in all the cars. Because they figured, well, look at all the money that Apple and Samsung are making selling these things. We'll put them in a car, and people will love it. And what has resulted is that what used to be pretty much the apotheosis of function, knobs, buttons, switches, that work, that are intuitive, that are ergonomic. You don't have to look at a knob to turn the channel on the station. You can just drive and turn the channel, right? Well, now you gotta go through a tap swipe menu, and the car's moving. So this is, it's moving and it's bouncing, and your finger's doing like this. And they've made something that used to be so easy to use, almost automatic, into this completely complicated, over elaborate interface. So I agree with you. It is enshittification. And the irony is it's expensive enshittification. When a little knob breaks, it's a little piece of plastic, easy and cheap to replace. Even if you have to replace the whole switch, it's a discrete assembly, meaning that control interface controls that. These integrated touchscreens are integrated. They control multiple functions. I had one of my readers who had recently bought a new car within the past year, and she was curious to see what it would cost her to replace the touchscreen in her vehicle if it needed to be replaced. So she went to the dealer to find out. She asked him, if I needed to get a new touchscreen in this car, what would it cost? The dealer told her $5,000.
So my follow-up question on that, Eric, would be, do you think that because they are bringing in, obviously, we have these non-governmental organizations that are very much pushing electric cars and smart and sustainable and this type of thing. So do you feel like there is, whether it's from like the board level, or do you think from perhaps like a BlackRock or Vanguard type thing, that there is this overlap, there's like this perverse incentive being provided by these groups to the people that are making the cars to make that move?
I don't think it's perverse. I think it's conscious and deliberate. The most effective way to control people is to control their mobility, next to food. That's probably the other thing, food and mobility. And electric vehicles are particularly amenable to being controlled because of the nature of the fuel that they use, electricity. True, you could potentially charge an EV using a solar array at home, but ultimately, for the most part, you're going to be dependent and tied to a grid. And it's a very different arrangement than it is with gasoline. You could, for example, I do this. I've got a number of 5-gallon jugs that I always keep full with Stable, just so that I have fuel on hand. Whereas these interfaces that connect you to the utility grid, you're at their mercy. They can turn it on or off whenever they want to. That's part of what smart meters is all about. I'm sure you guys are into that as well. And they've made it so that the anonymity that we've taken for granted with regard to paying for the fuel is out the window. This is something that they know exactly how much electricity you're getting, when you're getting it, and they have the ability to meter it, just like they do through these smart meters and smart devices that people are putting into their homes. The system can say, oh, you're using too much electricity right now running your air conditioner. And they'll then turn down your thermostat in your house, or the heat's too high in the cold winter. You're burning, your carbon footprint's too big. They turn it down. Another thing that they can do with these electric vehicles that really isn't possible to do with gas engine vehicles is fine tune the amount of driving range that you have. If I put 15 gallons of gas in my truck will go exactly as far as 15 gallons of gas will take me. Once I've got the gas, they can't prevent me from driving that distance. With electric cars, on the other hand, they can send out these updates that will alter how far the vehicle can be driven. There are a couple of real life examples of that involving Teslas. There was a hurricane that was that was going to hit Florida. I think this was about 2 years ago. Can't remember exactly. But anyway, they anticipated that there was going to be this big hurricane, a big storm. So Elon Musk, in his great benevolence, announced he was going to send out an update to all of the Teslas in that area to increase their driving range, so that the people who owned those cars wouldn't have to worry. They could get out of the way of the hurricane. And everybody clapped their hands. But it occurred to me at the time, implicitly in that is, if he can increase the range, he can decrease the range. He can decrease it to 0 if he wants to. And that's one of the things that I don't like about these electric vehicles.
I remember that, Eric. I remember that coming out. It's the same way with your iPhone. If you want to look at technology, the iPhone, when they want you to upgrade, they will push an update that makes your phone use more energy. It gets hot. The battery doesn't last as long, and then therefore you feel compelled to upgrade to the next iPhone. And they got caught doing that not once but twice. They got caught doing that. So they're going to do that with vehicles. And I do have some information here. I do want to jump to Karen because I wanted to start with the simplicity of it, get into the technology that we're at today, where we're going in the future. And what you were talking about, they can't limit your range in a gas vehicle. Actually, there's other things they can do. And I have some information on that. Yeah, we'll get into that. Yeah. But I want to, before we get into that line of thinking, I want to see what Karen has, because I have no idea. You said something about Farfignugan. You got me, my interest piqued. And go ahead, let me hand it over to you, Karen.
Okay, I'm listening on my phone because I have a big lag on my computer. So hopefully this will work out. Let me know. Okay, so I do, if we could share my screen. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry for the delay, folks. We got a little bit of lag issue going on.
So I have Eric's. I did listen to Eric's. Yeah, I'm sorry. Interview with Gard a couple of times, and there's our interview you did about Volkswagen and Farfignugan, and you mentioned that there was a ad campaign years ago about Farfignugan, and basically that it was not really something that translated literally, but it was a feeling, a driving feeling, and that the Volkswagens were well known for well-made, affordable cars that got great gas mileage, and it was a good feeling to drive in them. So I've got a couple of Farfignugan commercials, and I don't know if it's going to translate with the problems I'm having.
The German-engineered Volkswagen Golf. It fits your life. Complete. On the road and their drivers.
There's no distinction between car and driver in the Volkswagen Jetta. They are one. A oneness we call Farfignugan. It's the way the car responds to your every move with remarkable precision and control. The way its German engineering translates into genuine driving pleasure. Not every car company can promise that. In fact, there's only
So I'll turn it back over to Eric if you want to discuss those. I know I've got the lag issues here, but I thought that I enjoyed your article and I thought that that was an interesting take on things. So
Can I jump
I'm
in
so
real
sorry
quick?
about my. Yes,
But
please do.
before you go to Eric, because I want his thoughts on that. That just inspired me. It brought back memories, Karen. Those kids riding around in a little Volkswagen. It was an affordable waste of time, if you will, but it was living life. And I remember my buddy, he had it was an 80s Cavalier Z24. Eric knows what that is. It was a small engine. I think it was turbocharged.
I think 186, I think.
It might have been a V6.
I can hear you, so I want to talk a little more when you're done, Jason.
Okay.
I'm good right now.
But the thing is, what do kids do today? They sit on their phones. They're on the computer. Back in our day, it didn't take much money. You could scrape together. You could dig through your couch and find enough quarters to throw some gas in the car and go do some real life stuff. So seeing what you just brought on the screen, Karen, reminds me of those days when we got out and did things and experienced life.
Well, I was a kid I was a teenager. I went to college in the early 80s. My parents bought me a 1979 Toyota Corolla with 4,000 miles on it for my 20th birthday. And I drove back and forth to college every weekend in that little Toyota. I drove a Toyota Corolla for 10 years. My parents had a little Datsun that as a family car. I took my driver's license, my driving test in my grandma's little orange Datsun. She had a Honda Civic that would just go, and she commuted from the coast, a 3-hour commute to help take care of my family because my brother was sick. So my grandma was going back and forth, 80 years old in this little Datsun, and we could afford it. I was a kid on a working part-time. My parents were middle class, but gas was affordable. I knew how to maintain the car myself. I could change the oil, the battery, the headlights, the spark plug cables, the distributor cap. I could do all that myself. I could maintain that vehicle for the most part. I had a Chilton's. So that was a 1979 Corolla. My grandma had a Honda Civic. My brother ended up with a little red Toyota pickup that he drove. And so those were the days. And I was not afraid to drive. We've talked about this before. I would drive at any time, anywhere. And I felt safe. I felt the car was dependable. And I loved to drive. I loved road trips. It's like anytime, anywhere, let's go. Let's have some fun. Let's go down to the drive-in, get a root beer float or pastrami sandwich, or and let's go hang out or go take a drive. And people would do that. They take Sunday drives, and I think that that's a luxury that we're and even with you were talking about the step-by-step degradation of things and frustration with things and inconveniences with things. The infrastructure is degrading. The roads aren't the same. You can't flow. It takes longer to get anywhere. And of course, we see the quality of traffic control and congestion, and there's always construction that's never finished. So I do feel like this is all very, perhaps not deliberate on most levels, but at some level it's deliberate, in my opinion. And we're moving to you will own nothing, you will be happy, you will stay put, and you will use a subscription model for everything, including pieces of information, expertise, intelligence, and things that we used to use books for, even computers for, conversing for, knowing experts and having skills. All of that is going away to a subscription by the piece model. So I think this is a great example. So I love this Farfignugan piece, and I really enjoyed those old commercials too. And it's a perfect example. You don't need something big and expensive to have a really good quality life and enjoy yourself.
You ought not, but you do. And I've actually got a story that I can share that I think really will put this into some context. I have owned my 76 Trans Am since I was 25 or 26 years old, a long time. Okay. When I was 25 or 26 years old, in the first place, I could afford to buy it. Now, to be fair, at the time, it was still kind of an old car. It hadn't yet appreciated to being what it is now, which is a more highly collectible classic car. But the take-home point is that when I was 25 or 26, I could drive that car all the time. I could put a tank full of gas in it, 22 gallons for $20. Now, here, fast forward 30 something years later, there's no way I could afford that car now. I would have to take out a massive loan at high interest rate to be able to buy that car. And I only drive it occasionally because it costs about $100 to fill the tank up now versus $20, $22, $23 back in the day. So, you know, Jason, you were talking about cruising. Sure, when I was in high school and college, that's what we did for fun. I'd get together with my buddies and we'd go cruising. We'd go driving around. We'd hang out at the McDonald's, meet other friends, go here, go there. And we had, like you said, we could just scrape up some quarters from under the sofa. You know, somebody come up with a $5 bill, and we could have a night of fun. That sort of thing is now expensive for adults to do, and it's really, from my point of view, to think about. You know, I'm grateful for the opportunity that I had when I was young, but it makes me sad to think about today's kids who don't have that option.
And when you look at COVID, the COVID protocols and the lockdowns and the isolation, the 6 foot distancing, the masking, covering of the faces, this falls in line with the isolation of people. And back, you know, it wasn't even that terribly long ago. We would go uptown and cruise the strip at night, you know, after all the businesses shut down. It's 7, 8 o'clock at night. Everything shut down, but the streets were open, and we would go from gas station to gas station, and there was a couple parking spots. We'd honk and wave at people and socialize.
Yep.
Imagine doing that during COVID. You'd have the Stasi down there with their boots on your neck saying you're too close to one another and spending time with each other. And, you know, I think that's when we talk about transportation and the automobile, that really opened that up, because you think prior to that, people, they lived rather rural. I know there were cities and stuff like that, but people that were rural, they might not see their neighbors for months. You know, they'd have to ride a horse or walk or something like that. But when the automobile came around, that's when people started going over and having lunch and hanging out and going uptown instead of once a month to go get supplies. Maybe you're going once a week. So it brought people together. The automobile did that. And now they're making it where that's, you know, they don't like that, so they have to control it.
They particularly don't like the spontaneity and spur of the moment. You know, that's
right.
Lose with an electric car. With any other car, at the drop of a hat on a whim, hey, let's go somewhere. You don't have to worry. Even if you left the car with fumes in the tank, well, you just put gas in it. No big deal. You don't have to sit around and wait for an hour for it to get a charge, and you don't have to worry about running out of charge either. If you felt like it, and I did this back in the day when I was young, sometimes I'd be sitting around with my buddies and we'd be bored. Hey, let's road trip. Let's go, you know, and we would literally drive across multiple states to go see something and go do something. That's very difficult to do with an electric vehicle. Now, I want to touch on something that I wrote about the other day that bears on this. And it really irritated me, and I tried to, you know, dig into it from a humorous point of view. You probably have heard about Trump talking about the tiny cars. We're going to have the tiny cars.
Yes, I read that.
The context of this is that in outside of this country, there are a plethora of inexpensive little cars that people are free to buy. We're not free to buy them here, because the federal government has made it effectively illegal to import them and illegal to sell them. Well, just the other day, Trump and his transportation secretary announced, we're going to have some tiny cars. And you can see the picture. This is what he considers to be the tiny car. It's a $15,000 Fiat electric car that isn't legal to use on any public road, has a top speed of 25 miles an hour. It's useless. It's a golf cart. Meanwhile, about a week ago, I profiled a Mazda that you can buy in Japan for $10,000 that is actually a car. It has air conditioning too, if you can believe it. You know, a perfectly viable car that could be driven on American roads, no problem. That would be a great thing for teenagers, people in their 20s, $10,000, brand new. You can imagine that after 2 or 3 years, if these cars were available, you'd find low miles examples that were available for $5,000, $6,000. People could buy them. People could have what we had back in the day. Now, $5,000 or $6,000 will buy you a barely operational, decrepit piece of junk that you can't fix yourself either, because of all the over-the-top complexity in electronics. That's why most people in the 16 to 25 age bracket don't even bother anymore. It's unaffordable, it's unapproachable, it's alienating, and that's deliberate. You know, I think they have been trying to sever that connection between the rising generations and car ownership, the mobility, the freedom, and the growing up that comes along with that. All of us here in this room, when we turned 16, the minute we turned 16,
I was there that day.
Right? You know,
that day.
Didn't you feel like a grown up? You know,
I I drove my mother and my grandmother to the DMV on my 16th birthday, and then I drove them to a department store, and we all three got our ears pierced. Yes, I
That's
felt like
awesome.
an adult.
And you were. I mean, and this isn't just, editorializing. Back in our time, God, I'm sounding old. But the fact of the matter is, when you got your driver's license at 16, it was the same driver's license that your parents had and your grandparents had. There were
And
no
we had responsibilities. I worked, I
Yes.
drove people around, and I was expected to be responsible. It was the family car. At some point, we got 2 cars, but I had asked to borrow the car, so I was expected to use it responsibly, to be home before somebody else needed to use it. I mean,
You
I
were essentially a near adult at that point. You still lived at home, but you were on the
Yes.
cusp of becoming an independent adult at 16. And certainly by
Yeah.
the time you were 18 or 19, by that point you were, you're young, but you're an adult.
I
Now
was
they've
I
incentivized
was in college.
people
I
in-
wanted
people in
you
their
to
30s
address the
living at home.
hybridization of the Volkswagens, the move toward the diesel that could get 100 miles a gallon, and why you think that was Volkswagen took such a big hit with the fines and things.
I think it's obvious.
Yeah.
I think it's obvious. If you want to go down that road, Volkswagen was very successful all the way through up about 2015, 2016. And they were particularly, their success was particularly due to their lineup of affordable diesel powered vehicles. You could get a diesel Jetta, a diesel Golf, diesel Passat, and some of these models, they cost around $22,000, if I remember, for a Jetta TDI, 700 miles of range, 50 something miles per gallon. Now, interestingly, right around that time, they decided to find out that Volkswagen was cheating on federal emissions certification tests, which was technically true. But the interesting thing is that they had to use specialized equipment with hypersensitivity in order to even find this so-called cheating. These TDI-powered diesels passed state-level emissions, like when you take your vehicle in to get emissions tested, passed no problem. They passed the federal test. What they found was that under certain wide-open throttle conditions, those diesels emitted a pedantically fractional higher amount of oxides of nitrogen. It's meaningless in terms of air pollution, meaningless in terms of any harm caused, but they could nail Volkswagen to the cross over it. And they did. And the reason that they did, in my opinion, I think that this was congruent with the EV push. Right around 2015 or so was when that EV thing started to get really pushed. And I think that they could not abide the idea of Volkswagen having these alternatives to these electric cars. Because who wants to buy a $40,000 or $50,000 Tesla that goes 250 miles when you could buy a 700-mile Jetta TDI for $22,000? And the other aspect of this, it's not very well known, and I like to talk about this. I was talking about it with Garth the other night. Volkswagen was working on a diesel hybrid commuter car that would have gotten 100, 150 miles per gallon. And it would have just made the EV thing look completely ridiculous. Even though it was a combustion powered vehicle, the fact that it used so little gas is in itself a way to reduce emissions and CO2. If you're hardly burning any fuel, you're hardly emitting any gas. So anyway, I think that they crushed Volkswagen over that. And Volkswagen got hit with like $30 billion worth of fine. Record. No car company had ever been persecuted to the degree that Volkswagen was. They actually criminally indicted some Volkswagen executives. Another thing that is almost unheard of, because this sort of thing, fiddling with the regs happens all the time. But they made a big whoop about it. And they did, in my opinion, because of this whole EV thing. That was the subtext of it.
So when that stuff was going on with Volkswagen, Eric, I was actually in Fort Carson in Colorado, and we used to convoy down south all the time. There was a training area down there we used to go to. And I had noticed one day there was this massive, hundreds of acres of Volkswagen, and I believe it was Audi as well. These vehicles just parked out, just nose to nose. You couldn't even get in and out the doors. They just had them stacked in there. And it was because they were not allowed to sell them because of what you're talking about. And they all went away. So my question at the time was, can I get one of these like on auction or something? But I guess not. And then they all went away. So what's the environmental impact of either crushing those cars and destroying them after they've already got the initial carbon built into them to produce them, or do they sell them overseas? And what's the carbon footprint of shipping them these massive amount of cars overseas on these huge boats versus just letting them be on the road.
Sure, that's a very
marginal
point.
Yeah.
You know, one of the greatest things that you can do if you're green and you want to be environmentally conscious is to maintain and keep your existing vehicle for as long as possible, because the amount of natural resources and energy inputs that go into making any new vehicle are huge. Electric vehicles, much huger than that, because of all the special materials and additional materials that go into the electric vehicle. So the whole thing is fatuous. And I'll circle back to these tiny cars. These tiny cars are highly fuel efficient. You know, they get 50, 60 miles per gallon, most of these things. So if we're also concerned about the climate, we're also concerned about greenhouse gases, don't you think that they would be encouraging people to have access to these highly efficient vehicles that don't use a lot of gas, that are extremely affordable? Almost anybody can afford a $10,000 car. I mean, we could go back to the days when you could finance a new car in 2 or 3 years and pay for it, and it would only cost you $150 a month. I mean, lots of people would sign up for that, I think. And wouldn't that be good for the climate and the environment? Obviously, you know, it's just another con, just like COVID was.
And the insurance was reasonable too. I think my parents paid $1,900 maybe for that Toyota with 4,000 miles on it, and my insurance was per year was $149 or something like that.
Of course, that's cheap now too. You know, for no legitimate reason.
Yeah,
I've had my old truck. I have, just to put it in context, I have an absolutely pristine, perfect driving record. I have 0 points. I've had no tickets in years. I have not had an accident in decades. I have had nothing charged against me at all. So my premium on my truck went from $150 something a year to $300 something, just because they can. The insurance companies are a mafia. You know, I don't have anything against insurance in a free market where you're free to say no, particularly when they try to jack up your premium for no legitimate reason. But we're not allowed to do that. You know, it's become a cartel. They've got you over a barrel. You know, they literally make you an offer you can't refuse, you know, like Don Corleone in The Godfather. And so, of course, if you have to pay them, they're going to make you pay more.
I want to talk more on the tiny car thing, because I was looking at solutions yesterday and have some stuff, but I want to go to Ashley, because Ashley hasn't said anything in a while.
Yeah, well, I just had a quick comment, basically, that like what you're talking about with the big Volkswagen scandal, the diesel, to get all of these really efficient cars off the road. That was, you know, that was cash for clunkers in a way 2.0, which was exactly what that was. And so many of us fell for that. Like, I wasn't aware at that time about, you know, the globalist agenda for you to be in a smart city, a freedom city, and to have your mobility limited by, you know, by driving an EV or whatever. I didn't know about that. And so if I heard of people doing that, I was like, good for you. Like, you can upgrade your car. I just didn't think about it at that time. But then obviously it's disastrous for us, you know, for the plebs in today's day and time.
I think we don't think about it because we're probably psychologically normal people. Most people assume that other people are motivated by, you know, good reasons. They mean well. You know, we all make mistakes, but most people aren't deliberately malicious. They're not, you know, outright evil. That's what we're dealing with. And it takes a while to get your head around that. I think that's
truly does.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, so let's take a look at the tiny car thing, because I'm trying to look at solutions here, and I know, Eric, you've written extensively on the safety, right? And I wanted to start off with that, like where we were in the past versus where we are now and where we're going in the future, and some of the mandated things. I've actually read some pretty scary stuff that I don't know if you've written on yet about the alcohol detection through the steering wheel, through the air. Stuff like that your car won't go.
Yeah, that stuff is still speculative. They haven't hammered out.
I found some.
Well, but let me tell you, what they've done is to weasel it around a little bit. In just 6 months, when the 2027 models come out, per federal requirement, all new vehicles are going to have what they market as drowsy, distracted driver technology. And in practice, what that means is not having like a sensor in the steering wheel that you know samples your skin for booze, but watches your eyes. I've already experienced this. I've test driven a number of new vehicles that already have this, because the manufacturers now try to anticipate the mandates and get there first. And then they try to sell it as a feature. Oh, look how safe our car is relative to the others. So if you can just imagine the dystopian horror. And I discovered this by accident. You know, I do these videos where I have a little handheld camera, and sometimes I'll monologue while I'm, you know, talking and driving the car, and I'll pan around the interior. And my eyes didn't see anything. But later when I looked at the video, I noticed that there's a sort of like a little glass panel on top of the steering column. And I would see these red flashing lights. What is that? Those are the infrared cameras that are watching you, watching your eyes. And
you know, here's the irony. The irony of it is everything is operated through a touch screen now. But if you touch it, and you wrote an article on it, don't touch the screen, right? Because if you try to use the touch screen, let's say you want to change the temperature, turn the air conditioning up, or change the radio station, all of a sudden you're getting screamed at by your car because you're distracted. You're not paying attention to
and it will disable the function while you're trying to do that. You know, they don't even seem to appreciate that you might have a passenger in the front seat,
Right?
Who could enter, you know, the street.
I can't change the clock. Me and my wife recently went on vacation again. Second time this has happened in 2 years. We're going across. We cross time zones, and I'm in there trying to update her clock, which should be able to update itself because there's GPS, right? But you know, you have to go manually change it, and it says this function is disabled while driving. And I'm like, but I'm a passenger. And oh, by the way, if I'm trying to, you know, I'm bouncing around the car trying to get my finger on the exact precise pixel it needs to be on to change the radio station or whatever, and go through these extremely complicated menus to get whatever function I need. As soon as she turns the blinker on, it cuts whatever I'm doing, and there's a camera on the passenger side mirror that puts up the lane onto the screen. Yep. Now, when she turns the blinker off, you know, after she's changed lanes to get around the clover, now I've got to start from scratch again. It is just so frustrating. We just keep the radio off. We don't mess with nothing. We set the temperature and just screw it.
Isn't that outrageous? First of all, the presumption is that everybody is basically like, you know, they set up Gerald Ford that he couldn't walk and chew gum at the same time.
Right.
You know, the assumption is that you're an imbecile, that you're incompetent, and that you can't be trusted to do more than one thing at one time. The second thing, though, that I think is more insidious is that this is your vehicle, at least nominally. Like, you paid for it, you bought it. And now control is being exerted over the vehicle that you allegedly own by another party. That's outrageous. Once you buy it, it's your property. It should be entirely under your control. One of the things I love about my old muscle car is that it doesn't do anything unless I tell it to do it. And it doesn't try to prevent me from doing anything. It's all on me. I have agency. I have responsibility. You know, if I wreck, it's on me. I lost control of the car. I drove too fast. You know, I overdrove my abilities. I don't need to be parented by my car. It's really, really offensive to my way of looking at things.
You know, my daughter she and her husband bought 2 Subarus. Say what you want about Subarus. They're fairly liberal, but they're good cars. I feel like they're good choices for them having a young family with, you know, 2 babies. And so they bought a 2025 or 2024 Forester, and they just bought a 2026, whatever, the big Outback Subaru. And the difference in the surveillance wear between the 2024 and the 2026 is just off the charts. My daughter is that's constantly telling her, get your eyes on the road, put your eyes on the road. And she's trying to be responsible and actually use her eyes to look to make sure she can change lanes and things, or check on the baby in the back seat. Put your eyes on the road, put your eyes on the road. And she is just so frustrated with that new Subaru.
Right. We want you for being a competent driver. Situational awareness is important when you're driving. You know, good practice is looking left, looking right, looking in the rearview mirror, being aware of what's going on around you. This idea that it's safe to be like a blinkered horse and like staring straight in front of you, it's preposterous. But that's exactly what it does. I've actually had
browbeating her.
Sit up straight, you know, as if I were in kindergarten. Sit up straight, young man. And, you know, it took all my powers of will to avoid putting my fist through the screen, and it's going to get worse. It's totally. It's been passed for something called automatic emergency braking, AEB. A lot of new cars already have this. This is a system that preempts your judgment. If the car thinks that it's necessary to apply the brakes, it will. And I've had an experience multiple times of it coming on for no reason at all, no good reason. I was test driving a Honda Pilot last week, and I'm driving along on the road, and all of a sudden this gigantic rectangular orange flashing thing comes up in the dashboard. Brake, 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 you know, all capital letters with exclamation point for no reason, because the thing glitched. You know, these things are camera and LiDAR based. So it sees, if the electronic eye sees a shadow or something and it thinks that you need to brake, it will. Now you can imagine you're driving down the road and for no apparent reason, the thing slams on the brakes to somebody behind you, and they would not anticipate it, because why would they? There's, you know, they're watching you. They're seeing that you're just driving along. So they're not perhaps prepared, anticipating the need to slow down. So your car just suddenly slams on its brakes. The car behind you runs right into you.
Yep. Well, that's one thing I was going to say. And I made this argument when I was I forget what class it was taken, but I was taken as part of my college when I was in the military. But we talked about self-driving technology, self-driving, you know, the sensors being in the roads and the cars following the sensors, or the cars driving themselves. And I made the argument, I was the only one that made an argument against it. They actually agreed with me. I said, you cannot go to self-driving technology unless 100% of everything on the road is self-driving technology and communicating with each other, which means if they're going to go this route, they're going to have to push the old stuff off the road. Exactly. And to the automatic braking thing, what happens when there's a sensor and you hit a June bug? Anyone who lives in the Midwest, and even where you live, Eric, on the East Coast there, bugs get splattered all over your car. So am I going to have to get my car washed every single day from a car wash?
Well, what I foresee happening, because again, I've experienced this many times with these systems, again, because of the cameras and the LiDAR and the sensors that are the basis of the technology. If it snows, if it's foggy, even in heavy rain, those systems will go offline, and you'll see a little flashing warning display saying the various safety features are not operational right now. So what the safety Nazis are going to do is they're going to say, well, obviously a car that doesn't have its safety features on is not safe to drive. So therefore they'll lock down the roads when it's raining or snowing and won't let people go out under any kind of adverse conditions. That's where this is headed. And I think
that'll apply to the emergency vehicles too. It very well may.
It very well may, but you know, official government vehicles will be exempt. Just like cops don't have to wear seatbelts, cops can speed. You know, we're the ones who have to abide by the rules, not them. The other thing with regard to this AEB thing I foresee coming is not so much an outright ban. They won't say that cars that don't have AEB are no longer legal to be used on public roads. They'll use the insurance mafia. The insurance mafia will say, if your car doesn't have this safety technology, then it presents a high risk to the other cars on the road. So you're not going to be looking at paying $4,000 or $5,000 a year if you want to continue to drive your car on the on the public roads. And of course, that will drive most people out of owning a vehicle like that. And that's what they want. You know, ultimately, what they want. You remember what was that old Arnold Schwarzenegger movie where he
Total Recall.
Total Recall, and the Johnny
Cab. Yeah,
that's what they want. They want you to just basically be a sort of a meat sack in this Johnny Cab that is controlled externally, that allows you to be taken certain places, you know, provided you're a good boy or a good girl. You know, you've got a good social credit standing. They'll maybe allow you to be transported from A to B. That's it. They want to disempower us. To go back to the beginning of this conversation, you know, Henry Ford with the Model T democratized the car. Before the Model T, before that happened, cars were exclusively for affluent people because they were largely hand-built. They were very expensive. You had to be affluent to have one. Well, Henry Ford figured out how to just standardize parts, make it simple, make it inexpensive. He made it so inexpensive that any line worker at a Ford plant could afford to buy a brand new Model T. And he put America on wheels. And Americans all of a sudden were able to go where they wanted to go on their own schedule, you know, spur of the moment. That is what they've been trying to systematically chip away at and ultimately eliminate for the past 50 years. And they're getting really close to, you know, the grand end of this whole thing.
I'm glad you brought that up, Eric, and that's a good segue into where I was gonna go, and then go back to the tiny car thing because of the simplicity of it. That's where I was going. But before I jump to there, let me ask the ladies if they had anything to add on what's been said here in the last few minutes.
Handy said, I asked Handy if he was talking, when he was talking about of trying to flash the lights of the cars, the trucks in front of him, and the vehicle wouldn't let him. I asked if it was an emergency vehicle because he's a paramedic. So was it the emergency vehicle or his private vehicle? And he said our ambulances do the over speed alerts and collision avoidance. It's a nightmare while trying to navigate through traffic with lights and sirens.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Handy. It was either Handy or someone else that had mentioned that they're monitoring the driver and punishing them if they have bad driving behaviors. But what do you do when somebody
Right.
decides they want to, you know, there's a red light and you're coming up on a red light and they decide they want to be in front of you, pull in and slam the brakes on, you have to aggressively brake. I think it may have been Handy that said that you got slapped on the wrist for that, or somebody did. And they're doing this with truck drivers now too.
Yeah, ask the road truck driver what it's like. You know, a lot of them, it's such an exasperating position for them to be in. And for us also, you've been probably out on the highway and you've found yourself behind two tractor trailers. And, you know, the one in the left lane is sort of gradually creeping a little bit faster than the one in the right lane. And you're wondering, why can't this guy put the hammer down and just pass? Well, the reason is if he does, he's going to get in trouble with the company. You know, not only is there a speed limiter in the truck, but the company knows in real time everything that he's doing. And if he drives in any manner that's considered to be aggressive, forget about it. You know, they're going to fire him and he might lose his CDL and his ability to make a living. So, you know, this is happening with the commercial drivers, and now it's happening with the, you know, fingers quotes, civilian drivers, meaning us.
And this technology has been around. It was probably 15 years ago or more. I was at Fort Riley and we had to get a 15-pack van, which is, you know, not a cargo van, but a passenger van. We were out there on mission and we signed for this van, and it literally it tracked you everywhere you went. And if you broke the speed limit, and there was a certain section of road we had to drive to every day to the job site that was 55 miles an hour. Don't get me started on 55. I know, Eric, you'll go on for hours about that. But it was a real pain to keep it at 55 on a straight, wide open 2-lane where there's no cars. But if you broke by 1 mile an hour, according to the GPS, they would call you and tell you, bring your van back. You are no longer allowed to have a vehicle here.
You know, they set the groundwork by framing it that any deviation from any traffic law is ipso facto unsafe. So, you know, if you drive even 1 mile an hour over whatever the arbitrary speed limit is, somehow that's unsafe. You know, if you accelerate too quickly for their liking, that's considered aggressive driving. So, you know, people they dangle this thing in front of people, the insurance companies. Oh, get our little OBD, you know, dangle monitor thing, and you know, you get a discount. You'll be paying 30% less. No, you won't. You know, when you have to pull out fast because all of a sudden somebody's bearing down on you, or you have to jerk the steering wheel because a dog or a kid ran on the road, they're going to construe that as evidence of your aggressive driving.
Yeah, they're gonna find you at fault.
Yes.
And then raise your rates. That's exactly what I've been warning people about. Do not get the plug-in stuff, because once your older car is connected to your phone is connected to the internet. Now you are trackable and traceable, and they know everything you do.
So reasonable driving. And we all know perfectly well that, you know, it's reasonable to drive faster than whatever the speed limit is. I mean, think about it. We all speed. Everybody speeds to some degree or another. Almost nobody drives exactly the speed limit. Nobody feels guilty or shamed when they get pulled over for going 65 in a 55. You know, you feel annoyed because you know you're just being fleeced. You know, think about how interesting that is. You know, if you did something actually wrong that caused harm to somebody, that you injured somebody, you'd feel bad about it. You'd feel guilty, and you would accept responsibility and whatever your punishment was for it, right? Do you feel guilty and ashamed when you have to go to court and hand over a bunch of money to the government because some cop gave you a ticket for going 9 miles an hour over the speed limit? Of course not.
Yeah, real quick, I want to take a poll here with the ladies and with the chat, and of course you, Eric. You just brought up something that I had on the agenda to talk about. And I don't know if we're going to get to everything, but when it comes to mass surveillance and control of our vehicles, I have a lot of stuff on that, which we probably won't even get to. But there's an old adage that they used to use in the military about doing the right thing when nobody's looking, right? That's what they teach us. Do the right thing when nobody's looking. You know, if you're walking by yourself in a field and you see a piece of trash, pick it up and throw it in a waste bin, you know, that kind of stuff. Anyway, they would always use this. If you were in the middle of nowhere and there's nobody around and you come across a red light, do you stop and wait for it to turn green, or do you just look around and go? And I would always say I would freaking go.
Right.
But most people say that's not the right thing. you need to do the right thing. And that's what we're in this nanny state where we have to follow the rules, even if the rules don't make any freaking sense. Because I'm wasting gas sitting here idling.
It's this worship of what you call what is, there's a doctrine called legalism, which essentially says that if something is the law, then it is synonymous with right. That's a bad position to take. And it's an easy way. There's an easy way to prove that it is. There are lots of things that were against the law in Nazi Germany. Lots of things that were illegal in the Soviet Union. Were people who didn't hew to the laws in those countries criminals? It was against the law in this country to harbor a fugitive slave at one point. That was a crime. But was it the right thing to do? You use your noodle. Is something going to cause harm or is it not? Are we simply talking about affronting the authority of the state? Because that's what it is. When you're talking about being reasonable, you come to a red light in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night, you can clearly see there's no traffic. Sitting there mindlessly obedient, waiting for that light to change is stupid because it's mindlessly obedient. You have exercised due diligence. You've looked left, there's obviously nobody coming. So there's no good moral reason to sit there like an automaton and obey, but that's exactly what they want. They have equated obedience with what is right. And a lot of people have never thought about it much. And so they are, they're gullible in that sense. They're susceptible to this idea that people should be punished merely for being disobedient, irrespective of whether whatever they did was actually morally wrong.
Well, even on foot, they get you for jaywalking because you didn't go down to the crosswalk. Well, last I checked, the people on foot had the right of way. But anyway, that was my thing, because we go back to the plugging your phone in, connecting your car to the internet, and now the newer cars with their technology and being connected. And they are way more connected. In prepping for this show, I didn't realize until I went in, like, how connected these new cars are. But yeah, let's take the poll. We'll start with the ladies. Would you run the red light, and will we be able to run the red light in the future without getting automatically mailed a ticket? Because it was observed, because everything's connected. I mean, they're going to know what state the light is in. And I have some information on that, where cars talk to each other. And if one's going to run a red light, it tells another car, hey, someone's running a red light, and it puts on that automatic braking. They're trying to get to that stage right now where you're as a driver, you're just a passenger. So anyway, what do y'all think? Would you run the red light, or would you stay there and twiddle your thumbs?
Okay. It depends. In this day and age, my answer would be different. In the past, in an older car, in my 1979 Corolla, I probably would have come to a four-way stop and looked around and gone, because I grew up where there's a lot of agriculture. I'm picturing myself out on the agricultural roads, and you couldn't really see from all directions. There were tractors running around at night with no lights on. People got killed out on those roads. So I would probably come to a four-way stop, look around, and then proceed. This day and age, I would be concerned about a flock camera, or if I'm driving my 2024 car, that it's going to rat on me somehow. I've never connected a phone to my car, but you just never know. So I would probably stop at this point in time, maybe flash my headlights, because sometimes the lights will turn green if you flash your headlights. I'm not sure it probably depends on how much of a hurry I would be in and where I was going and who was around. But there's a good chance that flock camera is going to be somewhere watching me. If there's an actual stoplight there, there's a good chance but that doesn't mean that I don't know the difference between right or wrong or legalism or not. But it also, I know my insurance I don't want my insurance to go up. It's just, I think all of this surveillance changes the way we think about things. And I think that's the point. Who was it? Larry Ellison said that people were going to change their behavior because they would know that, for example, the police would know they were always being watched, or that people would know there's no more dancing like nobody's watching, because somebody is watching. And if they aren't, we're afraid that they are. So my answer would depend on the situation. Then Handy says in the ambulance, the AI watches our eyes, hands, seat belts, looks forward to, also watches our driving quality. And this is in the ambulance, that the AI is monitoring those things. So I'll hand it on over to Ashley there.
I'm running it.
Open dried.
I'm running it now. If I was concerned that there was, like a license plate reader or something like that, then I would look. But I have a lot of animosity towards this entire nonsense, just like what we've been talking about. It is very arbitrary. It makes no sense. And here's the other thing. Because one of the big arguments from the statist perspective is like, but my roads, it's a whole meme in the libertarian community, right? And then the libertarians will talk about like privatization and things like that. And I'm like, yeah, because here's the thing. Whenever, for example, the area that I just moved out of in central North Carolina, there's a town over and it's called Mebane, North Carolina, and it's blowing up, like really growing so much. So, and they are putting in a Buc-ee's even. Be impressed. But in order for the Buc-ee's construction to even start, they are having to make sure that the road changes that they're making are complete. And I just think to myself, like, we just trust, like, what is the group of people that we're trusting to decide that this is the best, most efficient traffic pattern based on whatever metrics they're using to facilitate the growth in this particular area? And the problem is that we always have to depend on them to make the decree of what is the safest. And we know that they're not efficient. That's like, everybody knows that, even if you're not an anarchist or a libertarian or whatever, like nobody thinks that the government is efficient. So why would they think that they could possibly design safe roads, safe traffic patterns? In fact, they're like, we have no competition to see, but we know that there are places that are very dangerous intersections and nothing really gets done about it. So I have a huge problem with that. And I have a problem with the fact, like, whenever I'm driving on the interstate and I see a whole bunch of state troopers that are just out there, and I say that, the piggies are out to eat today because they have some kind of quota and they're just trying to get you for speeding. And then it's frustrating to me because obviously there are real crimes that are happening, but me driving 80 on the interstate is really not the crime. That's not what you really need to be worrying about, because exactly what Eric said, I'm not hurting anybody. And if I do, then I get the consequences for that. But instead, you're going to get a ticket and you're just generating revenue for whatever the state highway patrol, so they can continue to harass motorists. It's very frustrating. Pisses me off.
Yeah, me too. There's not much money in going after real criminals, but I think the fundamental point here brings us back to what I think, hopefully most of us learned during COVID, is that we're not going to comply our way out of this. Ordinarily, I am somebody who very much respects property. I respect, other people's boundaries and so on, but they're pushing us into a position where we have to push back with regard to things like these flock cameras and this servility that they want to impose on us, where, oh yes, Mazza, I'll do just what you say because I got a camera watching. Who wants to live that way? I think one of the great reasons, aside from just not wanting to be a scumbag for not being a criminal, is you don't want to end up in a prison where, everything is controlled, where you're watched, regimented. You're not allowed to do anything just about unless they say you can. Well, that's what they're building for us outside the prison. Do we want to live that way? I don't want to live that way.
Well, and a lot of this is on pre-crime or pre-injury, judged before something happens. And this is a good point to segue over to the beginning, where we started with transportation, because all of this is being done in the name of safety. Everything's done in the name of safety and preserving life. Well, I want to share this. What is this that I have on screen right here, Eric?
Model T Ford.
Model T Ford. Now, I want people, if you can see this, and I'll explain it to those listening on audio. There are no auto dimming headlights. There are no anti-lock brakes. It's not all-wheel drive. There's no seat belts. There's no roof even. No assistance whatsoever. I'm sure there's no airbags. I don't even see windshield wipers. I think the first windshield wipers were hand operated. You actually grab a lever and turn it. And was this a massive problem of people just being killed in these things? Because this is what revolutionized the world right here. This vehicle revolutionized the world.
Accidents. There'll always be accidents. I think that we have arrived at a state of almost paralytic neurosis in this country where, any risk is too much risk. And, that's deliberate. They've inculcated this idea that, they even talk about vision zero accidents, zero fatalities. It will never happen, ever. You know, you can minimize, you can reduce, but it's a balance. Life is a balance. You have risks and you have rewards. And ultimately, what's more important, being able to be free to get in your car, drive where you want to go, or cringing and quaking about the dread and fear that you might get into an accident. And the evil manifestation of that is this idea that might happen justifies you imposing something on somebody else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I understand these vehicles did not move as fast. They didn't go 80 or 90
miles an hour ish.
Yeah. Yeah. But the thing is that, when we talk about today and the over enshittification, as Ashley said, of everything and systems for your safety, I think a person should be able to make the judgment call of whether they want to buy something like a Model T to get to and from town. I mean, there's actually places in Illinois and even in Missouri here where they let you drive your side by side through town because they understand that it's safe. It's a slow speed limit. You can go there, go to the store, go back home. Certain roads that you can do that on. That's becoming more popular now, which is really good to see. But another thing I wanted, before we get into the tiny car thing again, I want people to look at this vehicle, how simple it is, how reliable and fixable it is on the cheap. And I'll just run through a couple more historical photos here. Here's them putting the drivetrain together. So you basically have a frame. You've got your axles and they're dropping the engine in, and there's a simple transmission of some type. And then here is them putting together the interior, basically the body and the seats and stuff like that. Not much to this vehicle at all. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because the Model T is what made the world mobile. It was a humongous, it just changed the world. The industrial revolution blew up because we can get materials.
It was emulated, and not only was it emulated, it lasted. Some people will think, well, the Model T, that was 100 years ago, and that's true.
They still run.
They still run. But until rather recently, cars, for the most part, were still pretty simple. Karen, the car that you drove, your little Japanese car, very simple vehicle. I used to drive a Super Beetle back in the 90s. It was the German version of the Model T, a basic, simple car. What's happened over the last roughly 30 years is that they've added needless, gratuitous complexity and without any meaningful improvement. Here, to give you some context. So I've got an 02 Nissan Frontier pickup. It's got fuel injection, and it starts just as quickly as any 2026 model year car that I test drive. It doesn't buck or stall. It's completely reliable. So what is the improvement? It's been a quarter century. What has happened? How have they made cars better from the standpoint of the owner? They haven't. What they've done is they've made them more complicated, more failure prone, more expensive. And now we're getting to the point where they're less durable. It's extremely unlikely that any 2026 model year vehicle that you buy right now is going to be running 25 years from now, let alone running well.
Somebody had mentioned that to replace the screen, which is the control hub of the newer vehicles, was going to be $5,000.
Yeah.
Most cars, when I was a kid, you can get a used car for $1,500, $2,000. You could literally save up from your part-time job after high school. You could save up your money and pay cash for it.
Yeah. I mean, all of us, when we were in high school, did you have a car? I had a car. All my friends, pretty much everybody had a car because cars were inexpensive. They were beaters, they might've had some rust,
but they were simple. That's the thing, is they were simple. And that one, before I hand it off to the ladies, one thing I wanted to mention about the Model T we just put up on screen, my grandma told me about this. She used to tell me about this. Now I know back in the day when Model Ts first came out, horses had the priority. So if a horse was scared, if let's say you're going down some unimproved dirt road between towns or whatever, and a horse would not move because it was scared of the Model T, you would literally have to disassemble it to a certain point and hide it in the bushes so the horse could pass.
I never heard that one before.
No, yeah, I actually I read about this or saw it on a documentary or something, and my grandma had told me that when they had a Model T, and when it would break down, she would be the one that would fix it because she had the smaller hands and can get in there without having to pull the whole hood.
There was very little to fix. I mean,
there was very little to fix. And that's what I'm saying about that. And I do want to show some stuff about tiny cars and some solutions that people can come up with to maybe get a simpler car here in the US, because I know that's something you talk about, Eric, that's just not available because of safety. But there are some things I found. But anyway, that simplified thing is what we need for young people, because I know with my own stepkids, they cannot get a foot in the door of the world because they are cut out of the opportunity unless you can come across some kind of windfall of money or something like that. You're not going to be able to get into self mobility, not easily. So it's a big problem that we've tried. We bought them cars and stuff like that. They're just not very good at taking care of them. And that's another thing that we could go on for days about when you actually earn something, you take care of it. But when you're given it, you don't take care of it. So that's a whole nother issue. But anyway, I'm going to shut up now and hand it over to the ladies. Any thoughts?
No, I agree. I think that all of these are important topics to be discussing. And, it ties into not only the car element, but the liberty element and the ridiculousness of government, the absurdity, the arbitrary nature of what is happening. And then what very much appears to be the systemic insurance that we don't have freedom of travel. Not good.
Yeah. It's a multi-pronged thing too. Getting back to what Jason said about kids and cars, and how it's arresting their development and keeping them in the nest and preventing them from growing up. Look at the rents. I mean, geez, when we were kids, you could get together a couple of your buddies and get yourself an apartment and crash at it. Now the rents are insane. People can't afford rent. People can't afford cars. So you got, I forget what the statistic was, but it's really astounding. Something like half of today's 30-year-olds are still living at home with their mom and dad.
That's sad, man. I couldn't wait to get out of the house.
Sure.
When I was 18. Yeah.
Another thing we talked, or people have been talking about in the chat, and Eric you addressed a little bit, is that I see so many young people who, first of all, seem to be afraid to drive, to take that step toward independence, but also their parents can't really afford a car and insurance for them. And it used to be that we learned to drive in school. There was a driver's training course in high school, and I remember going out with 2 or 3 other students and a teacher that was his job was to do that. And we learned to drive, and I think we learned to drive pretty well and safely. And we also had a good understanding of the rules and laws and conventions. And I feel like we were prepared. When I went to the DMV, I was prepared. My parents also took me out and practiced with me, but I was ready and willing and raring to go driving wise when I was 16. But I know most of the young people I know, it's a rare exception at this point for someone who's, say, even 18 to be having their driver's license and then actually be taking the responsibility to drive. And I think perhaps when you wait so long to try to learn to drive, and the way that things have changed, it's so much more crowded on the road, more chaotic. People are not such great drivers anymore. And then using these cars that don't really give you the autonomy to learn to feel confident in your own ability to drive. These cars are meant to take your agency and your own confidence out of the equation. So, I see that as possibly an issue or a stumbling block or a roadblock or a deliberate thing to take that confidence and self-assurance and knowledge of how to operate a vehicle safely, how to navigate traffic safely, away from the younger people who are taking that step to learn to drive, which they seem to be reluctant to do these days also.
Yeah, I very much agree with you. And I think there's another element here that's much more subtle and much more pernicious. It is that they have been conditioning the rising generations to be terrified of cars and driving. And it starts with the safety seat. Now, I know some people out there might immediately go, oh, is Eric saying people should have their kids in the car without the seat? Yeah, I am. When I was a kid, You sat in your parents' lap and they let you hold the steering wheel. You know, the car was fun. You know, you jumped in the car, and as soon as that thing stopped, you jumped out of it. Now the kid, I mean, imagine what the message is being conveyed. These little kids who, you know, they're strapped in this thing. They're not allowed to move. The message is the car is dangerous. It's unsafe. You know, and so they grow up. It's not fun to be in a car strapped in. Do you like being strapped in?
It's a nightmare trying to get. I have a 3-year-old. My grandson will be 3 tomorrow, and there's another one on the way. They have to do a 2-hour car seat test to see if they can handle being in a car seat for 2 hours before they come home from the hospital now.
Sure. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
And so I talked to my daughter about this the other day, that when I was a kid, we didn't have car seats. It was my mom's arm. She'd stick her arm out when she was coming to an abrupt stop. And then when she was a baby, my daughter was a baby in 1993. I mean, there was a little seat she sat in, but I didn't have to strap her in with padding everywhere. And it's just gotten more and more restrictive. And my grandson is strapped down in that thing so tight. It's
horrible.
It's absolutely horrible. And that's part of this is anxiety. I think that, and they also don't want us to feel safe away from home. I think also.
Yeah. You know, they're turning it into an ordeal for the parents and a drag for the kids. It's not fun to go for a drive. It was fun to go for a drive when we were kids. Now it's not. So, you know, by the time the kid gets to be, you know, a pre-adolescent, and it's like getting close to the time of potentially learning how to drive and getting a driver's license, they're not interested. You know, they don't want any part of it, understandably. You know, I get it. And this is, again, I think it's part of a concerted, deliberate effort. They have been working on this for a long time to just sever that emotional connection between cars and driving and the rising generation. If they can succeed in doing that, then after all of us die off, you know, that there won't be any more opposition and objection to all of this stuff.
I wanted to say real quick, actually, just real quick comment. I think it was Eric last time you were on. You gave a great mental picture that I just had to throw back out there. You said it was, I believe it was you that said it's like strapping in Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
And that's a very strong mental image, emotional image. And even if the kids are in the car now, they're not even paying attention to what's going on. They're on their devices.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You remember when we would like roll around in the back, like if you had, you know, if your parents or your friend's parents had a station wagon, and the kids would ride in the back, and you'd roll around in the curves, you know, maybe you'd get down on the floorboards and listen to the engine, you know, all that sort of stuff. And you were able to you could move from this seat to that seat. The kids would play around in the car. It was fun. It was enjoyable. And they have taken that away in the name of safety. And I understand that if you get into a wreck, you know, and you're not wearing a seatbelt and the kid is not buckled up, yeah, the chance of an injury is increased. I get that. But I think it's gotten to be neurotic, this obsession with safety and fear and worrying about all these what ifs, instead of simply enjoying life and taking reasonable, prudent steps to minimize the risk. You know, most accidents, I don't like that word because it implies that it's just something that randomly happens to you, you know, like, you know, a rock falling on your head from the sky. The fact is that most of these so-called accidents result from inattention, from driver error. You know, if you are conscientious and responsible and pay attention, you can greatly reduce the odds that you're ever going to get into an accident. Not eliminate, but you can greatly reduce.
Well, the driver error, and I'm sorry, Ashley, I'll be done in a sec, but the driver error, I believe, comes from the slow roll of taking the responsibility and the situational awareness away from the driver over time through these safety measures. So now, like I was saying before, the driver is now a passenger for the most part. So if we had never gone this route, and going back to the Model T, people had to be aware. They had to know what the controls did. They had to know what the limits of their vehicle was. And you didn't see people, you know, having these, of course, there were slower speeds, but they also had more dangerous roads, unimproved roads and stuff, but they knew how to deal with that. And I think people don't know.
Level of skill. You know, I've long been a proponent of, you know, of kids learning to drive a car on with a stick shift, manual transmission. And I feel that if you can't master that skill set, probably you're somebody who ought not to be driving. But if you can, you have achieved a degree of capability and skill that already puts you at an advantage. You develop this habit, because you have to develop it, of being more involved and aware of what's going on with the car and around you. You can't just zone out. and stare straight ahead and, not notice that something's happening with regard to traffic. Because when you have a stick car, you have to think, okay, I'm going to have to slow down. I got to put the clutch in. I have to downshift. I have to anticipate the need to speed up or speed down. And I think that just the ubiquity of the automatic transmission has greatly contributed to the dumbing down of the driving pool.
I agree. I think that people who prefer to drive stick shifts tend to be better drivers and possibly more intelligent, and it's more engaging, I'm so glad I learned to drive on a manual transmission on several types. I can drive pretty much any configuration on a regular passenger vehicle. And I think that's an important skill to have. And I'm glad I have it. I agree completely.
Particularly with regard to new teen drivers, people talk about how they're worried about their kid is going to be pecking away at their cell phone. It's really hard to peck away at your cell phone while you're driving a stick shift car. It's almost kind of a checkmate. Okay, you can drive, but you're going to drive a manual car, and that kind of prevents them from pecking away at the phone while they're driving.
It's genius, Ashley.
Yeah, I also learned on a stick shift, and I do think that it was valuable. Now, I definitely pissed my dad off. My mom was the better driving partner for teaching because she would laugh at me, but my dad would get so mad at me whenever I was making a mistake when I was learning to drive. It was like a 94 little Civic. But anyway, neither here nor there. But back to what is happening with the kids these days. They're referred to as the anxious generation. And if you think about even from millennial on, it's like crisis after crisis after crisis that is hugely publicized. And we move to this, especially with the advent of the availability of the internet for everybody, beyond a 24/7 news cycle. It's like 24/7, but from 30 different sources, basically. So I think that does contribute to that. And I think that there's a real loss for kids these days who are missing out on being able to drive. But I do agree that the fear is an important element maybe for the predator class, because I was speaking with my sister. So her kids are friends with this family of kids. Okay. And the little boy in this family is a very anxious child. And ideally you would think like, you're a kid, you should be living it up, having fun with your friends. But she talked about how he is allowed to watch a lot of YouTube, and the algorithm is feeding him things that make it worse. So for example, roller coasters, but not people having fun on roller coasters, things going wrong on roller coasters. He's a 10-year-old kid, a little boy, and he doesn't want to ride roller coasters because of this stuff. And there was some other topic that she was talking about that it does the same thing. And I'm like, people need to realize how impactful that direct to brain propaganda your child is getting from something like YouTube to make them more scared, more fearful. And so it doesn't just apply to driving, but it's also all of these other basic life skills, answering a phone. Hello, how are you? I mean, there's even jokes online for how millennials or people, other generations answer the phone or leave a voicemail. Hi, my name is blah, blah, blah. My phone number is blah, blah. My number again is, and then kids these days are like not even taught the basic decorum, basic manners. It's really strange. It's a strange time.
They're made to fear the real world. And again, I'm not suggesting that there aren't dangers out in the real world, but we didn't grow up that way. We were allowed to go outside on our own and to explore the neighborhood and hang out with our friends and ride our bikes. And we learned to not run in the road because there are cars there. We figured things out. And it was important psychologically because we began to feel confident and competent to negotiate the world and to deal with it, without mommy and daddy there, to make sure everything was safe. We learned to evaluate risks even at a young age. There's a creepy dude over there. I'm not going to go where that creepy guy wants me to go. We all had experiences like that. Now these kids, like you said, they're taught to be absolutely terrified of anything that is outside their immediate cloistered environment. And you got to have mom and dad there all the time to make sure they're keeping you safe, keep you safe. It really angers and it depresses me. And that's why I write about it and talk about it all the time.
All right. Well, hey, let me jump back over solution portion. Man, I have so much stuff we're not going to get to today. It really sucks. But so I want to go to the simple car, because we're talking about, and the simple car, that's great. Y'all talked about using your cognitive abilities and skills and feeling the car and driving the car and the stuff that we grew up with, which is taken away from the young generation. But I found some solutions. So here we go. This is the car I drove in Okinawa. Everyone will recognize this as a classic Mini, right? Classic Mini. Now, you can get these here in the U.S. and you can drive them in the U.S.
Yep.
It apparently is safe enough, but you cannot sell something like this in the U.S. anymore. You're right. It's apparently safe enough to register and to drive, but you can't produce something like this. And I know you want to talk about the tiny cars again.
You already feel some, Jason. Not that I would, but hypothetically, legally, I could sell my Trans Am to some 16-year-old kid.
Right.
It would be perfectly legal for me to do that. And it would be perfectly legal for the 16-year-old kid to take my Trans Am with no ABS, no airbags, no assistance technology of any kind, rear-wheel drive, big V8 engine, 4-barrel carburetor, all of that. And that 16-year-old kid could get plates, registration, and legally drive the car. But that same person cannot buy the $10,000 Mazda Flare that has that has an airbag, that has anti-lock brakes, and has most of this other stuff, because it doesn't quite comply with every jot and tittle of all of the federal so-called safety requirements.
And that's the problem. The problem is, it's not really a restriction on what we can buy. It's a restriction on what could be sold. So these are implemented on the manufacturers. So when Trump talked about, we're going to build tiny cars, well, we're not going to be able to sell them here. And, your article about the tiny cars, like you said, this is basically a golf cart. It's an enclosed golf cart. It's really is an
electric car with a top speed of 25 miles an hour. That's not a road going vehicle.
Yeah, you can't do it. You'd be a hazard. But here's some solutions that I came up with, and I want to jump over to here real quick. Back in 2010, I bought this.
Awesome.
This is a China bike. It's a 250, single carburetor, very simple, one lugger. The thing had a top speed of about 75 miles an hour at top, maybe 70.
That's enough.
Yeah, that's enough. And I did want to talk about motorcycles. Probably won't get to it, but I really enjoyed your Why I Ride Alone article. I have some stories about that. But this was a China-produced bike. Technically could not be sold in the United States. Cannot be sold because it's, I don't know, it doesn't have everything that it's supposed to have, but I could import it. And it got me to thinking, if I was able to get this vehicle, and I think I want to say I spent $2,500 to $2,800 total. That's to buy it in cash, ship it here from China. I had to pay a little extra for some paperwork that got me through the DMV. It was a little bit of a nightmare, but I was able to tag it. This thing was registered for 5-6 years before I gave it to my neighbor. I traded it for a gun, to be honest with you, because my wife didn't want to ride it. So that was her bike. So I got to looking, can we do this with vehicles? Sure as crap. Yeah. I found this site here, K cars, and you know what a K car is.
That's a tiny
I remember, I remember my first wife, she was Japanese, and we didn't have a lot of money, and she got a brand new car for probably like $15,000. And it was a nice car. It had airbags, it had everything, but we can't purchase that car here.
Yep.
But I thought, what if we use the same mechanism where we purchase it from overseas, go through the process of bringing it over? Can it be registered? Can you drive it? Because you talk about, a lot of times you talk about the Hilux. Yeah. Hilux was very, very popular over in Japan, especially the diesel models. Very, very popular, and they're die-hard trucks. Well, we can't buy them here. But I mean, we could look for solutions. These are K cars right here, used, that you could not legally sell new here in the United States. That's the key right here. You can't sell it new. They can't produce it. We can produce them and sell them overseas, and that would help our industry a little bit, put people to work or put robots to work, whatever, but we can't sell them to people to get to work. That's the point. But I did find that you can come find these, and let's take a look at this one here. Little Honda 2-wheel drive, 96,000 miles. And that's another thing too. In Japan, you can only put so many miles on the engine, and then you have to either get rid of the car or replace the engine.
Yeah.
So there's actually a huge market
Shank and Shakedown.
Yeah. there was a huge market when I was in California. We were rebuilding engines and stuff like that. We could actually go down to the port where they had just tons and tons of Honda and Toyota motors with like 70,000 miles on them, almost like brand new motors. It was cheaper to replace the motor than it was to do the head gasket, to be honest with you. But anyway, this is one solution. If you go through one of these websites, you can go find these K cars, which for some reason, because they're used, you're able to import them here. You're talking a couple $1,000s. This one's only $1,800. By the time you pay everything, like I had to do with the wife's motorcycle, they're going to translate the title and all this other stuff, and then you got to go to the DMV. You're talking $3,500. Now, the downside to this is that this was a solution I was looking at for like young people, actually for my kids that need a new car. The problem is I can't exactly get financed on it. So you're going to have to come up with the cash up front. And that's another stumbling block for those trying to start out to get into one of these affordable rides that will get them from point A to point B, especially if you live urban, not rural. If you're just going 15, 20 mile an hour down the street, a lot of stoplight, these are perfect little vehicles.
There's actually a way around that too. There are
go ahead. So I'll open it up for everyone to
that sell these kinds of vehicles. As it happens, there's one in my area. It's called Duncan Imports, and I've seen a number of these also in other states, and I can't remember exactly which ones, but you can probably find it out pretty easily by doing a search online. And essentially, it's a used car dealer that specializes in these gray market right-hand drive K cars, and also just oddball Japanese vehicles and export models and so on. And since they're a dealer, they can help with the financing, if that's an issue for you. So that's another way to potentially get around this.
Nice. I didn't know they had that service.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? And the other thing that, before I hand it over, the other thing that I found interesting about these K car type things, that they are built very minimal. So, let's tie it back to the Model T. Very simple, very minimal, still relatively safe and affordable, and they're not connected. And that was where I wanted to go later. We may not get to it, but the connectivity part, this is even if you're not just someone starting out that needs this cheap, reliable vehicle that gets good gas mileage, that you can actually afford the insurance on and all this other stuff. Maybe you just don't want to be connected. Maybe you don't want to be tracked and traced. This is an option for people that maybe like you and I, Eric, they're a little bit older. Maybe we need a runaround car where we feel like we're not being monitored all the time.
Well, sure. And, I'd like to go back to that statement about safe. I don't like the way that word is used because it's manipulative. It implies that the car is unsound. In other words, that, you're going to crash if you drive this car. That's nonsense. What we're talking about is, well, okay, does it have 4 airbags? That's a different question. It may be more crash worthy if you crash, but it does not mean that you're likely to crash. My 74 Beetle was not an unsafe car. It didn't crash. I might have crashed it, but it was not an unroadworthy car. So I think we need to dissect and dispense with this idea that there's a tautology, that safety means the car isn't going to crash. It doesn't mean that. It just means it hasn't got everything that the federal government currently requires. I mean, Jeezy peasy, I could go back to, say, just 10 years ago, get a 2015 Mercedes S-Class built like a tank, and it isn't safe by current standards. If Mercedes took that same 2010 S-Class and tried to sell it today as a brand new car, it would be considered unsafe, because some aspect of it doesn't exactly comply with the current federal motor vehicle safety standards rigmarole.
Ladies, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's very frustrating. And we, they're discussing the Hilux in the chat. And I think that we've talked about that on one of our last 1 or 2 episodes with you, Eric, the fact that this is a really reliable, good truck that people are denied access to, and there really is no good reason for that. So it's very frustrating, and it's frustrating to know exactly what we're talking about, that, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, it was just such a completely, totally different game as far as being able to afford a car, buy a car, get a used car that's pretty decent, pretty cheap. I mean, it's just completely different now, and it's really discouraging, and it is concerning for younger people who are trying to get out on their own, because it's cost prohibitive in a million different ways. And your number one way to freedom is to be able to have a vehicle, especially if you don't live in a place with you know, a really major public transportation system in place.
Yeah, I mean, it's metastasized. It happens that I just now got, they dropped it off for me, the 2026 Toyota Tacoma pickup. Guess how much the sticker price is on this thing?
$60K.
Close, $55,000. You know, juxtaposed against my '02 Nissan Frontier, which when it was new was $14,000. Now, granted, you know, the current Tacoma is a nicer vehicle in the sense that it has more features and equipment, but you can no longer buy, because it's not available in this country, a basic little truck. And you know, because of that, even the used vehicles are insanely overpriced too. Yeah. You know, I bought my '02 Nissan when it was 5 years old for $7,000. There's nothing analogous to that anymore. Nope. You know, this Tacoma, when it's a used vehicle, will be $30,000. It's batty. You know, whereas the Hilux, you know, they make a small version of it called the Champ. Really useful little vehicle that has a folding down side bed walls. It's configurable. It's available with a diesel engine, and it's about $14,000 in Japan and other markets. A lot of people would like to buy a little basic truck like that that's useful and functional and affordable, but they can't.
Those things are great. The little fold down sides and all that stuff. Yeah, they're great. They're huge in Japan, and they're actually pretty powerful. I pulled a Hakuroku, whatever they call it. I had a '69 Skyline. So you know what that is. It's Hachiroku. That's what they call it. It's the name for the year or whatever. But I had to get that from one house to the other when I got out of the military the first time and had to move. And it's a heavy car. This is like an old '65 Mustang, you know, kind of, you know, heavy steel, stuff like that. And we used one of those little trucks to pull it. And we went up a humongous hill, and the truck was just burning rubber, sliding.
It has a 7,500 pound tow capacity, you know, which is getting close to what you can get in a half-ton truck here as far as baseline towing capacity, but for a fraction of the cost. And
they're very versatile. I mean, the bed's folded down. You can make a flatbed out of it. You can box it in.
Oh, but you know, they're too crude. They're too primitive. People wouldn't want them. Well, let them have the opportunity. Why not let the market decide? Well, I'm all for alternatives. Like, I'm not against electric vehicles at all. As far as if people want to buy them, they should be free to buy them. And for that matter, they should be free to buy these little Chinese EVs, you know, that you can pick up for $5,000. Why not? Who am I to say to somebody, you're not allowed to buy that kind of vehicle? I'm not you. I don't have your needs, wants, budget, whatever. You do you, I'll do me. That used to be the American thing. Like, we used to have choices and freedom. We don't have that anymore. Everything's being homogenized and centralized. And we're ultimately going to get to this like one size fits all, dreary, drab Soviet kind of system where, here you go, comrade, this is what you're allowed. And that's it.
Well, you know, they've raised us, and I want to go to Karen, but I do have one more thing. I know we're coming close on time, Eric. I have one more topic I wanted to talk to you about. I want to go to Karen first, but I think Ashley alluded to this earlier. People are being, for the last couple generations, people have been coddled to the point that the safety thing, and that's going to be what I want to talk about, is the motorcycle thing you talked about with driving beyond your skill set, and how, anyway, we'll get to that. But yeah, I think that the people are coddled so much. They're afraid to go get a license. I got my daughter right now. My one daughter, they live together now, and they both got a job at the same place. One doesn't have a car. One does have a car, but then she totaled it. The other one, well, she has a car, but it's not running yet. And then come to find out she doesn't have a license because she lost her physical license, which was from Georgia. And now she has to go get a Missouri license here, but she has to go and do the test. And she's like, they want me to parallel park. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do that. How do I parallel park? I can't get my license. Oh my God, the world is ending. It's like, go practice parallel parking. Like, how hard is it? But she's scared to death to try.
Yeah. Well, they're making it implicit that it's scary. You know, they will, these cars now have park assistance, steering assistance. Yeah. The assumption is that we're all cripples. You know, I mean, imagine a world in which perfectly able to walk people had to walk around with canes and walkers, you know, like you were assigned that. And you'd never learn how to walk, let alone run. Imagine, toddlers were never, ever allowed to stand on their own two legs. They had to have little canes and little walkers. They need assistance. I mean, I'm not saying there's nothing wrong if you actually are disabled in some way, if you need help. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's something very wrong with assuming that everybody needs help, that everybody is disabled.
Karen, your thoughts?
Well, I would say that the fear factor, the feeling that we're incompetent and that we don't have skills or are not capable of being competent, self-sufficient, self-assured, and making good decisions, critically thinking, is pervasive throughout society today, throughout our programming and our training, not just in the driving or the vehicle area, but in other areas too. Trust the science, trust the experts. You have to trust the experts. You don't know, you haven't had the experience. And also the choices, the availability of choices that's being whittled away so that we can't try things to the extent that we used to and decide for ourselves and make those decisions. The taste testing experience of life has really been whittled down, and also the experience passed on from previous generations, and that feeling of confidence, having your grandparent let you drive, quote unquote, sitting on your dad's lap driving when you're the little kid. I don't think you're going to get away with that in one of these newer cars that's got that's telling you keep your eyes on the road, and then you put a child in your lap that's not in a car seat. That's not going to fly.
Yeah,
so I think that
I did an article about this the other day. There was an incident in Southern California where a couple of teenagers, 15-year-olds, they got a Waymo, self-driving car. They did what dumb teenagers do. They got some booze and they got some water pistols, and they were, cruising around and shooting people with the water pistol. Well, anyway, the cameras inside the Waymo saw what they were doing.
Oh my goodness.
And went to a parking lot, shut it down, and summoned the cops.
Yeah.
And the cops came and dealt with the kids. But the take home point here is that's what they're going to do to us.
Yes.
You're doing something out of line.
In your own private vehicle, by the way.
It's not yours. Yeah. It's not yours at this point. You are not the owner. You are not in charge. And I think that we're seeing that pushed on us with so many things, with our healthcare, with our choices for food, where we live. So many things are the AI, what you learn, how you can learn, all of these things, how you view material. You can't even own physical. Well, you can, but the ability to own physical media, the old CDs, LPs, tapes, it's everything streaming. Now they're talking about taking away a lot of the things that you thought that you owned by having a streaming service or a gaming service, that you won't even have those available to you. And I don't stream music. I listen to music, but I don't stream music anywhere because I just don't like the idea of it. But I think that it's not just with the cars and the small cars or the reasonably priced cars. And it's not just the fear of driving. I think it's the fear of so many things that we're being raised to have these days.
You're absolutely right. It's a combination of enshittification and enserfment. What was the characteristic of a medieval serf? He had no power over his life. He was allowed to do certain things, and that was the extent. He spent his life doing what he was told and living under constant dread that the Lord, the guy who actually owned and controlled everything, would be displeased with him and would withdraw the little pittance that he was allowed. That's the kind of world that they're trying to recreate with technological means now, rather than just brute force.
Well, God forbid you drive an unauthorized vehicle on the King's Road.
Right.
Let's go.
Or even having the ability to read or to learn to do certain things or have access to books. That was kind of limited at times. And I think that we're seeing that now too, with the advent of AI and just the cleaning up and disappearing of the internet, basically dead internet theory, the search engines, they're all becoming pretty much the same, and you can't find very much there. They're feeding you things instead of a tool to look.
Oh, and they're altering the past, which is why I'm a big proponent of buying books, hard copy books. They can alter, you get a Kindle version of, say, Orwell's 1984, and you find that they've altered it. They've changed the politically incorrect parts of it to things that are more palatable. They do this sort of thing, and they're going to do it more in the future. So I think it's
the very name Kindle to me always was a book burning name. I just always associated Kindle with book burning.
Yep. So get things that you control, physical things that nobody else can control from, unless they come and take them from you, which they can try to do. But it's more difficult to do that. And I think that that's a way that we can reassert control over our lives.
Really quick, this is random, but in regards to books, so Dean Koontz has the book that is, I think it's The Eyes of Darkness or something like that. And so the original version came out maybe in the 70s, and there was a reference to a certain Gorka virus out of Russia. And then whenever it was reprinted, it just so happened to be a Chinese virus out of Wuhan. So that was interesting in the physical book. So that's one thing too, that I even think about these days in your physical copies, try to check and see what was changed from, the original printing, but definitely it's so much easier for them to delete things or memory hole things whenever we have ebooks. So normally if I read an ebook, I just try to keep it to something I don't really care about, like just a basic fiction that has nothing to do with anything, and like rent it from the Libby app. But anyway, what I wanted to ask you, Eric, is do you think that we still have some time left on some cool cars? So a few months ago, I was looking to see where can you even buy a straight drive anymore? And whatever I found was saying that there's basically I don't know if it was top 30 or 30-ish total that you could buy a car that still had a straight drive. And is there anything that's not over the top tech, like anything new at all that is not the surveillance car and also has some cool features? Or what are your thoughts on that? Is it game over?
The pickings are slim. At this point, there are still a few vehicles that are available that are new but old, in the sense that they haven't been much updated for say 5 or 6 years. So even though it's a 2026 model, you're still basically getting a 2020 or 2021. So it doesn't have some or even all of the latest stuff. One of my perennial favorites is the Mazda Miata. It's still relatively affordable. Manual transmission is standard, has a small, peripheral display. It's not something that you have to use to operate functions in the vehicle. A lot of fun to drive, good gas mileage. But, it's one of a dwindling handful of vehicles like that.
Yeah, that's great, because I do have an older Subaru, and I've been thinking, now I need the wagon. I need the Mercedes wagon. I have dogs, and they need to be able to ride in comfort. You know what I mean? But I like what the conversation what Karen was saying, as far as just 1 year of difference in her daughter's Subarus that they bought is absolutely a huge change in the tech and the big brother surveillance. So I'd like to be able to buy another Subaru at some point if I wanted to. But
because I give you a very specific personal example. My sister, on my recommendation, bought a 2020, was it 4, I believe, it might have been a 23 Crosstrek, which was the last year that you could get that model with a manual transmission and without the eyesight, without the creepy eye movement monitor system. And it was either 2023 or 24. In 25, it became automatic only and eyesight became standard. So you just have to do a little bit of research. There are still vehicles out there that you can get that on balance are still desirable to get. But unfortunately, a lot of the new stuff is getting to the point of passing the Rubicon of desirability, in my opinion, because of all this pushy, creepy stuff that they're putting in the vehicles that you don't have the ability to opt out of.
Right. Because even with the Subarus, if you turn it off, some of the things you can turn off, but it doesn't mean that it's still not tracking all of those metrics. So for all intents and purposes, it's totally worthless for someone like me that does not want to be surveilled by my car any more than it probably already is, even as a 2012.
Right.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that was a great question, by the way, Ashley, because I would love to be able to get something simple, easy to work on, low cost of parts, maintenance, stuff like that. But and we're not going to get into this today because we're pretty much out of time. But I was looking at regulations, and you've talked about this, Eric. I'll just throw this up real quick as a teaser. We'll have to come back and revisit this. U.S. regulators want cars to include drunk driver detection technology, which includes the looking at your eyeballs, pupil dilation, things like that. I think in the UK it's going in. I think it's going to be mandatory. Anyway, there was a lot of stuff that I wanted to talk about the automation, but I do, if you have time, do you have a few minutes, Eric, so I can go into your motorcycle?
A couple, yeah.
Okay. So we'll go through this real quick because I think there was something. Oh crap! What did I do? I just tried to tip myself by accident. What's going on? I clicked on the wrong thing. Anyway, I thought this was very awesome. This article, "Why I Ride Alone," and when I read this, this is maybe what was July 4th. Okay, you did this a week ago. This is really important. If you read through this article, it talks about riding beyond your capability because you're pressured to, and I've experienced this myself. Specifically on motorcycles, I've had a couple oh crap moments where it's like you're trying to decide whether you're going to try to continue on the bike or go ahead and just dump it in a controlled dump. And I know you know what that feels like, Eric, right? And I'm going to play this clip because this is kind of cool. I like that you included this on your thing. Let me full screen it. And this is some dudes running down, and this is kind of the situation I've been in a few times. We used to do motorcycle safety rides in the Army. Guess what? They don't ride safe. They ride like crazy, and you have to keep up. And I was pulling up the tail end a couple times and was driving not so much beyond my abilities, but my bike is not a sports bike. I have a Harley.
Yep.
And you're trying to keep up with the guy who wants to get on it and exceed the speed limit, even though we're not supposed to. But this is what happens when you ride beyond your ability. I'm going to tie this into the automation here, and then we'll get everyone's thoughts and we'll get out of here. But let me mute myself and play this.
Ow. Yep.
All right, so you can see the guy went down. He wasn't anticipating what was coming, and fortunately, it didn't seem like he got hurt that bad. But that's happened to me, and the reason I wanted to bring this up, and you can talk whatever you want about motorcycle riding, Eric, of course, but not knowing the limits of what you can do, I think ties into the automation for safety. The car has to do everything for you. So we're losing the ability to know what the car is doing, to feel the road. We have drive-by-wire now. We don't feel the vibration in the pedal of the engine. Even my Colorado, which is a 04 Colorado, has a shift light. I don't need a shift light. I don't need for it to tell me when to shift. I have, number one, I have a tachometer, so I can look at the tachometer, but I also can feel through the stick shift. I can feel the vibration in the transmission. I can feel the engine. I can hear the engine. So automating everything puts us in this position of being very infantile, to where now it doesn't matter what speed we're driving. We are driving beyond our capabilities because we've lost those capabilities. And I'll say this, as far as a motorcycle rider goes, if I don't ride for a while, like a year and a half, I can't go out and ride like I used to ride. You have to build back up to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I just want to throw that out there as maybe being the automation being a problem creator to put us in a position where we are always outside of our own capabilities. And now that drives the solution of having the car to take more over, or the vehicle to take more over those responsibilities. So let me throw that out there, and that's it.
We're individuals, aren't we? There's a spectrum. We all have our own pace. You know, when I wrote that article, I was thinking about how riding a bike is kind of like running. I'm a runner, and trying to run at somebody else's pace is always uncomfortable. You're either pushing it or you're not. You know, you're riding it. You're running or riding at a pace that's below your own comfort level and skill set, or above it. And neither of those things is particularly a good thing. And you know, when guys are out riding, particularly, you know, Jason, you've been there and done that. You know, testosterone and bikes, and everybody wants to try to keep up. And it's you feel pressured to try to keep up, or I don't want somebody trying to keep up with me if they're not you know, they're not as good a rider as I am, but somebody's trying to keep up with my level. I don't want anybody to wreck on account of me. I don't want to.
You don't want to be the wimp, though. You know, it's an ego thing.
So, you know, I've always thought of motorcycle riding as a highly individualistic thing, you know, like running. You know, it's something where you go out and, you know, it's you and the bike. It's almost like a modern, you know, old cowboy thing, you know, where you're out on your horse by yourself, you know, riding the trail. That's how I look at it. And so that's what that article's all about. If anybody wants to go and read it.
I enjoyed it. And I really wanted to tie it into the other topics I had with number one, the degradation of actual skills because of automation, which drives more automation for safety. And there were some other things, but we can do a part 2, or I can do a little solo one on the level of automation that's just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, that'd be great. We for another one.
All right, ladies, what are your thoughts on that?
I want to let Eric get on his way, but those of us in the chat are having a great time reminiscing about our favorite old cars. And wouldn't it just be wonderful if we could have our favorite car from the past back again? Each of us.
I still have mine.
That's just wonderful, Eric. I'm happy for you.
Before we jump to Ashley, I want to kind of put this in very simplistic terms about where my mindset is about going beyond your capabilities because of all the safety features that have given us overconfidence and less awareness of what's going on. Think about when you grew up. All of us grew up. Did we have knee pads and elbow pads and bicycle helmets? No. We rode, and if you crashed, guess what? You got bruised up. So we learned, don't ride beyond your abilities. Now everyone's in bubble wrap. Somebody had mentioned that in the chat earlier. Let's just wrap all the kids in bubble wrap. Well, there's no consequences. We could just go crazy now until something bad happens. Yeah. Right. And then what's the solution? More bubble wrap.
It have to be worse. You know, growing up driving cars that had low limits gave you respect for the limits of the car and for yourself. Now the limits are so high on average cars. Get into a Camry. The Camry has higher grip threshold than most of the Ferraris of the 70s. So, you know, it encourages a person because it feels perfectly safe to drive this thing at 100 miles an hour and you know, to go into a curve 20 over the posted speed. Oh, it's just easy. One hand on the wheel. The problem is once you ratchet it up beyond a certain point, when things start to go awry, they go awry much faster and much worse than they would have if the situation had been at a much lower speed. You know, things will happen, but the consequences are less severe. So now you're potentially facing a fatal accident as opposed to, you know, what would have been a fender bender in the past.
And Ashley, your thoughts, and then we'll get up out of here.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like riding beyond your level, I don't know. I never had a motorcycle. I do know that I had a go-kart as a kid, and I was very reckless. And my grandmother said, Ashley, you're driving over these hills way too fast. You need to slow down. And I thought, what do you know? And then a couple weeks later, I flipped it and I broke my arm. So but you know, as an adult, 16-year-old, I never had a motorcycle. It was probably for the best, to be honest.
You would tear it up on a motorcycle. I'm telling you, if you can flip a go-kart, you can wheelie a motorcycle. But let's go ahead and plug everybody and get out of here. Thanks for staying the couple minutes extra, Eric. And I wish we could have got into the rest of the stuff, but I knew it was going to be too much.
Well, just holler at me and we'll do another episode.
Yeah. All right. So here's your website, epautos.com. You can put EP Autos or Eric Peters Autos. I can't.
No, my mouth probably after too much coffee too.
Yeah. Well, the grandson just got home, so I'm kind of distracted as well. But and then I like this website on Rumble here. You have your site. I like this because you do your little kind of off the cuff as you're driving.
Yeah, they're just shorts, little monologues and things.
Yeah, if people don't have time to read the articles, which the articles are usually not that long, they're pretty good, information dense articles on EP Autos. Over here, you kind of talk about the articles before you write them. It's kind of like your pre-article thing. So I like seeing that, and if it's something that interests me, I go read the full article. And then
I don't bother with X anymore. It's a crab pot full of AI. It's pointless.
Yeah, I just thought I would throw it out there. I can still see you about 1 out of every 3 posts that you make. I actually see, and I do try to interact with it. And if you are on X, please go follow Eric. Check him out. You're going to have to physically go check him out because you're not going to be notified. But if you interact with it, maybe we could break that algorithm. And then also, I did want to point this out. We've never pointed this out before, but you do Wheels Up with Bill Meyer. And you also do the Brian Hyde Show. So tell us a little bit about that.
They're just 2 radio programs that I've been doing for years. Every week I get together with Brian Hyde, who has a podcast, and Bill Meyer is a friend who has a radio show in Medford, Oregon. And, those are regular. I do those every Tuesday and Wednesday.
No, it's good. And they're pretty, your segments are pretty short, like what, about a half hour or so?
A half hour, 45 minutes. Yeah.
All right. Well, before we get on out of here, Karen and Ashley, plug yourselves. And Karen, tell us the exciting news. I don't know if you want to tell it yet, but or maybe
I'm not going to quite tell it yet. There's things going on in my family that are very touch and go at this point. Okay. So I don't want to put dates out there yet with what's going on. But I'm here every Saturday at 11 o'clock, and I enjoy being here very much with everybody. And Eric, was your favorite car a 76 Camaro?
No, I don't know.
Trans Am?
I own a 76 Trans Am. I've owned other Trans Ams and other Camaros. I've owned a lot of different cars over the years. So
what's your favorite car that you still have?
Well, I still have that Trans Am. I've had it longer than just about anything else in my life. It's my lifetime car. Okay.
Because we were trying to remember what you said was your favorite car that you still have. So yeah, I'm here every Saturday at 11 o'clock with my friends Ashley and Jason Pacific, and I am working on getting a show started, but there's things going on with my life right now that I just can't commit right this second. So hopefully this will pass. And thank you for your prayers. And I hope everybody has a great week. And it was wonderful to see you, Eric. And I do follow you, and I do see your posts occasionally, and I enjoy your mind melds with God.
Thank you.
All right, Ashley.
Yeah, Eric calls it excrement.
I thought that was kind of clever.
I think it's very clever, and I couldn't agree more. And I don't understand, like, what you say and what you talk about is not that incendiary, like compared to some of the egregious stuff that I read on that app or site or whatever. Like, it makes no sense. But so I agree with you. It is excrement. And then thank you so much for joining us today. I've had a great time. I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to be here because of moving chaos, but it worked out. Movers are done. Now the unpacking and settling begins. I had somebody tell me that my bookshelves are triggering them because they were uneven. And I agree. They're not going here, but it was moving day. Anyway, so thanks everyone. And you can find me here Saturday, 2 p.m. Eastern. And then on my show, Think Change Repeat, Thursday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The last 2 weeks, this past week, I spoke with John Brisson. It was a great conversation. And the week before that with Yona, which was amazing as well. And then on Friday, July the 17th, my friend Sean and I are doing a live episode of the Fool Me Twice podcast, our first live. And we are talking on the anniversary of and doing a deep dive into TWA Flight 800. So feel free to check that out. It's probably going to be about 9:30 on Friday.
Cool.
Sweet. Well, if you don't mind, Ashley, since you've been keeping track of all the viewers in our Rumble chat, if you want to do the shout outs, and then Karen, you take over and close this out with your weekly saying that I love so much.
Okay, sounds good. Again, I tried to get everybody. If I didn't, it is Jason's fault. LT Oracle of Truth, Andy VW 1980, Big Ron, Be My Valentine, Hello Is Not Available, Topographia, Karen Peterson, Spirit of the Age, Skunk Hollow Rose Gardens, Guard Goldsmith. Oh, I have Spirit twice. Ronnie Omelets. Robin. sorry if I said that wrong. No voter ID, Little John, Nostradamus, I Handy, Yona Aniwodi, Frankie M7, Levi Narrowway Narrowgate, Anna, Linda Craig, Ronakek, TK2 Beyond, Bronx Stomper, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, but happy belated birthday, Bronx Stomper. Still Spring Chicken, Harps, and SMU Husky or Smoo Husky. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thanks to everybody for being here and everybody who will join in the future. I hope that everybody has a great week. Do not go quietly into this dark night or this panopticon of control. Drag your feet like I'm doing is what I would encourage people to do. And thanks for being here. As I said, keep your sword sharp, keep your armor tight, and shine your light. Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
Thank you, Eric, so much.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities, Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about troubling and irresponsible, one-sided news stories
plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish fake stories that are true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.